You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com.
This week's edition of Banner Monday is coming right up. Before we get to that, a quick word from this week's sponsor, SeatGeek. As you know, getting tickets online can be far too complicated. With hundreds of sites and varying levels of reliability, it is hard to know who to trust, but that's why SeatGeek is the way to go. SeatGeek pulls millions of tickets into one place so you can easily find the seats you want for a price you're willing to pay. There is nothing quite like being there in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. And there are only 3 opportunities left to watch your Indiana Hoosiers play at home this season, and I know it's been an awful season. We haven't been winning at home, so it's not exactly as easy a sell as it usually is to get to Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall, but it's the last 3 opportunities to watch Romeo play in an IU uniform, and perhaps even more importantly than that, the last few opportunities to watch Juwan Morgan play in an Indiana uniform after his 4 seasons of just being a warrior for this program. Obviously, his senior day coming up when Indiana faces Rutgers on March 10th. But the Wisconsin game before that and the Michigan State game on March 2nd, where we will be in attendance. Ryan, Andy, and I will all be at that game. So if you need, a little extra motivation to get there, if you're thinking about it and you want to go to that game, we would certainly love to meet you. So if you do get tickets, of course, go to SeatGeek, get your tickets there. But also shoot us a message, tweet me, send me an email, let me know that you're going to be there because we would love to meet up. And we're going to be at the Crazy Horse after the game, so you can come meet us there too. But, really, if you can go to the Wisconsin game tonight, there are tickets right now from $20 on SeatGeek. So some really well-priced tickets to get in there to the hall, support these guys, obviously help them, end the season with some kind of momentum going down the stretch. And the reason to do it at SeatGeek is because SeatGeek is designed to make your ticket buying experience easier than ever. SeatGeek searches multiple ticket sites and grades every ticket based on value, so they help you immediately identify the best seats to fit your budget, and every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It's by far the easiest way that I've found to shop for tickets. I would use SeatGeek to buy tickets to an IU game if we didn't have a listener of the Assembly Call who was so generous as to let us use his tickets. But I've used SeatGeek to buy our tickets to a game in Assembly Hall before. So I recommend them because I use them and their app is really good. And best of all, listeners to the Assembly Call get $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app, enter the promo code ASSEMBLY today. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets. And now, here's this week's edition of Banner Monday. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Banner Monday, where we kick off each week by doing what IU fans love more than anything else, and that is talking hoops. This is the 17th edition of Banner Monday, and it is our 490th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the afternoon of Monday, February 25th, 2019. I am your host, Jerod Morris, and let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. There are no silver linings to losing 12 out of 13 games. The results are in the books. They are unacceptable. It goes without saying that the coaching staff won't be able to survive a stretch anything close to this next season, regardless of the context. And as I reflect on this awful stretch of losing and try to find reasons for why next season could and should be better, I keep settling on 2 factors. Indiana's improved defense, which is number 26 nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency, and it's once again awful three-point shooting, which is 321st overall. So I decided to look at the other top 30 defenses and how three-point shooting correlated with their success, and what I found did not surprise me. Of the top 30 defenses in adjusted defensive efficiency, only 4 have 12 or more losses: Northwestern, Georgia Tech, Akron, and of course, Indiana. And of the top 30 defenses, those 4 schools are among the bottom 6 in terms of their three-point percentage, all ranked 294th or worse nationally and well below average. The outliers at the bottom, VCU and Duke, who have the number 4 and number 5 defenses respectively. In other words, truly elite. Northwestern, Georgia Tech, Akron, and Indiana are ranked between 22nd and 29th defensively, so very good, but not elite. The lesson? If you have an elite defense or a roster full of NBA players, you can compensate for poor three-point shooting like VCU and Duke do. But if you only have a very good defense, not elite, like the other teams that are with Indiana in the 20s in adjusted defensive efficiency, Virginia Tech, Gonzaga, Lipscomb, Kansas, Louisville, Nevada, and Buffalo, then you need to be able to hit your threes to be a good team and win at least at an NCAA tournament level. All 7 of those teams I just named are at least average as three-point shooting teams. So let's play a fun little game. What would Indiana's season look like if they just hit threes at the clip that, say, Buffalo has this year? Buffalo is shooting 34.2%, while the national average is 34.4%. I looked at each of Indiana's losses and bumped their three-point percentage for that game up to the national average. Just by doing that, hitting a couple more of the open shots Indiana has gotten in some of its poorest shooting games, the Hoosiers would have 4 more Big Ten wins. Indiana's losses at Northwestern and Iowa would have become close victories, as would home losses to Ohio State and Purdue. In this hypothetical dream scenario, the Hoosiers' record would be 8-8 in conference play and 17-10 overall. We'd essentially be Ohio State, who is number 18 in defense and, yep, you guessed it, hitting threes at right around the national average. The Buckeyes aren't having a great season, but they're still solidly in NCAA tournament projections, despite losing 3 of 4, something we'd all take right now. So what's the point? It's this. If you believe that Indiana's defensive improvement this season is sustainable, and Archie Miller's track record suggests that it is, then the question you need to ask yourself as you look ahead to next season is, can the Hoosiers become simply an average three-point shooting team? Because if they can, and if the defense remains top 30, then it's more than reasonable to expect next season to go much better than this one has. And while that modest improvement isn't nearly enough to begin any real conversations about hanging banners, because it takes much more than just good defense and average three-point shooting to be a great team, it would at least represent an encouraging step forward and a path back to the NCAA tournament. And sadly, right now, during what looks like it will be a 3rd straight year on the outside looking in, that will have to do for positive visions of Indiana's short-term future. All right, joining me for today's Mailbag segment, he's a columnist for The Big Lead and a host of The Hangover. It is Ryan Phillips. Ryan, any opening thoughts before we knock out some questions here?
Can we please just beat Wisconsin? That's my only opening thought. I just really like to beat Wisconsin and maybe make some jumpers. That's where I'm at right now.
Just make some jumpers.
Just make some jumpers. We don't make a lot. I just want to make a few.
Just make some jumpers. That is our rallying cry heading into Tuesday night. Just make some jumpers. Any jumpers. Just some jumpers.
I don't care where they're from. They could be from 5 feet if it looks like a informed jump shot. I'd really like to see it.
Just make some jumpers, guys. All right. So Mike DeCourcy will be here soon to do our Big Ten Roundup. I'll do a short preview of the Wisconsin game coming up after that. But let's jump into some questions, Ryan. David asked, do we have to win the rest of our regular season games and get to the semis of the Big Ten tournament to have a hope of making the NCAA tournament? You know, you win the rest of your regular season games, you're 17-14. You get to the semis of the Big Ten tournament, you're probably 19-14. First of all, I would say let's just win one. Let's get the next victory. But I would say, yeah, if you want to dream about the NCAA tournament, you probably have to do at least that to get yourself back in the conversation.
Yeah. It's also going to depend on who you beat. I mean, that has a lot to do with it.
Well, in this case, you're beating everybody. So
right, no, but I mean, it's going to depend. Obviously, it's going to depend on you beat Wisconsin, you beat Michigan State, you beat. It's and I will say this about Michigan State, who's coming up, and we're going to be there this weekend. Michigan State isn't as good a team as the one that we beat in Lansing. They've lost Nick Ward. It's a different situation for Michigan State than it was. They're playing very well, and they're a very well-rounded team. And Cassius Winston is a guy that can carry a team to be better than they are. But I don't know, man. I mean, all the games left on Indiana's schedule are incredibly winnable. The problem is this team just doesn't play up to its potential, and so you've got to figure out where you're going, what you're going to do, and who you're playing, and map it out. I mean, if you get to the Big Ten tournament semis and you win the rest of your regular season games, certainly you're going to give people something to think about. But we'll see. There are enough big wins on the schedule where if it's between Indiana and another school, I think you're going to, if they're pretty even, I think they're going to tilt towards Indiana. But you got to get to that point first, and right now it just doesn't look like this team is at that point.
So Josiah asks, has this stretch of losing already done too much damage to Archie? Indiana losing to Syracuse in 2013 damaged Crane to the extent that not even a Big Ten championship in 2016 was enough to repair the damage. I definitely don't mean to imply the loss to Syracuse was the only reason he was fired, but I do think it did irreparable damage to Crane in the eyes of many fans. The kind of damage I'm worried Archie has already experienced with this losing streak. What kind of damage has a losing streak done, and what will he need to do over the next 2 to 3 seasons to repair the damage? It's a good question. I think it's a little bit of a faulty premise, but I understand where the question is coming from.
Yeah, I think it's a little misguided. I think that people who in the know aren't questioning Archie very much. They think there's been a lot of factors. There's been a mountain of factors that have led to this losing streak. This isn't when Tom Crane's team would lose and we could just point to on-ball defense. You know, I mean, it's just like if they played better on-ball defense, they'd win. You know, I mean, there are 9 to 10 factors you could point to in this losing streak that have just snowballed and made this all the way it is. And I think some of them are out of Archie Miller's control. Certainly injuries and just throwing the team's rhythm off has been a huge part of it. Certainly some of the players he has who, you know, he inherited, who I think he would not choose to go out and get, have something to do with it. But yeah, I mean, there's a million factors. Certainly in the minds of a certain segment of the fan base, yeah, Archie is no longer golden. And whether I agree with that or not, I mean, I don't think any coach is golden or untouchable, but I think that whether I agree with that or not, it's certainly true. I don't think this is something that will take a long time to dig out of. If Indiana comes out next year as a completely different team and focused and intense and, you know, looks like the team we expected them to be in the first half of the season, then I think most people will be like, all right, well, there's a lot of bad things going on last year. It just kind of snowballed, and that's what happened. Here's my thing about Indiana fans versus the national sort of perception. Nobody around the country is questioning whether Archie Miller is the right guy for the Indiana job. They believe that this has been a season where things have just been awful and fallen apart. And what we saw at the beginning of the season is more like what Archie Miller's going to do at Indiana than the back half of the season. That's not encouraging to Indiana fans who have to watch these games. I get it, but I think sometimes it's worth stepping out of the Indiana bubble and sort of viewing what everybody else sees. And a lot of people have looked at this team and said, you know, a guy like Deron Davis could be a cornerstone of a team. He's, you know, probably still not at 100%. You've had injuries to Rob Finney right when he was getting hot, starting to hit threes and starting to be a reliable guy on the perimeter. Totally threw off his season. You're missing Race Thompson for the entire season. In 2 short stints, we've seen what Race Thompson can do. Obviously not from an offensive standpoint, but just from an energy and a defensive standpoint and a rebounding standpoint. You're missing Jerome Hunter, who was going to be a stud for this team. It was going to be a guy who could spread the floor, also drive and make some things happen offensively and be a really nice compliment to Romeo Langford. I mean, nationally, the perception is this is just a bad hand they've been dealt, and they've been playing it poorly, basically, instead of, you know, managing to find a way to make chicken salad out of, you know what. But I think that when you're Indiana fans and you have to watch every single game and be disappointed every single game, it, of course, snowballs. But I don't think that this has taken the shine off of Archie as much as I think some Indiana fans believe. I think that a good stretch of play, and I think people would start to realize, okay, this is more what we're expecting. And if they had been losing games like these last 2 games, where it's close, it's tight, you're 1 play away from winning, and the hustle, the effort, the defensive intensity is there, then yeah, I think that it would be a different perception. But for a long time, there was a malaise over this team and they weren't playing well. And I think that that's what people remember right now. And they're forgetting there have been some positives to develop over that time.
And we don't know yet what the final kind of tone of the narrative will be for this losing streak right now. We won't know that really for a couple of years because, you know, with the Crane-Syracuse game, that was bad when it happened. There's no question about it. But if Indiana had made it back to the NCAA tournament the next year, been competitive in Big Ten play, and been consistently successful, that would have been a really bad game, but it wouldn't have felt like it kind of feels now, where it's like this was the beginning of the end for Tom Crean. You know, it was all the stuff that came after that that helped to color our perception that this was maybe one of the first signs that this guy wasn't, really the right guy for the job. And certainly this has the potential for that. Like if next season doesn't go well and then the fourth season, we're once again like not even on the bubble, okay, obviously people are going to look back at this and be like, okay, well, you could see it in year 2 when they lost 12 out of 13 and he didn't have a way to stop it. But we don't know yet because there's still a way that or there's still a future where Indiana's really good in year 4, and you look back at this and it's like, well, the guy was dealing with players from another coach. They couldn't shoot. They had these injuries, and kind of got unlucky along the way. That was a weird time, but he's really got things back kind of consistently year in, year out now where they're winning. So we just don't know yet. So I like the question from Josiah because I think in a couple years, we could look back on this like that Syracuse game, but we just don't know yet. And we have to remember that it's what came afterwards for Crean, missing the tournament more often than not, competing for the Big Ten one year and finishing 11th the next year. That's what did him in.
And I think that Syracuse loss, some of us expected it because of the matchup. I mean, we just did.
Some of us, says the guy who predicted it before the tournament started.
I go back to that when you guys asked me, who would you not want to be in a bracket with? And I said Wisconsin that year and Syracuse were the two teams I did not want to be in any. I wanted to be on the opposite side of the bracket just because of the way they played and the way that Indiana was constructed with smaller guards. Syracuse had very athletic guards who played on the outside of that zone to prevent those guys from shooting. And what happened? We got matched up with them in the Sweet 16. And we've always said it. You need some luck to win a national title. You need some luck to advance really far in the tournament. You do, because you need to have matchups that fit what you do, or at least are neutral matchups. That was a matchup that swung way in Syracuse's favor.
And we also looked clueless, too. And, Hulls was hurt, and there were a lot of factors.
Sure, there was the combination of that, but just the straight-up matchup was terrible for Indiana. You wanted somebody who was going to try and play man-to-man on Cody Zeller and Victor Oladipo, not zone them. And because the key of a zone is you can basically double a guy but your guys on the outside have to be able to make shots and spread the zone out. And nobody could get a shot off with Yogi Ferrell and Jordan Hulls because of their lack of size.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't think that loss was necessarily the nail in the coffin for Crean with people.
It was the beginning.
It was the beginning of, then they come back the next year and look terrible. And it's like, all right, well, what's going on here? We were supposed to have this whole new crop of young guys who would help that team, sort of transition to the next thing. And it didn't happen. And I think that was more damning than the actual loss to Syracuse.
Yeah. So, again, we're just going to have to see the timing of this. If Indiana had started the season with 12 out of 13 losses and then, gone 12-2 in their next 14, if you just reverse the seasons, it's a lot different. But this coming at the end of the season in Big Ten
really
play,
improved.
right. So, again, I mean, there's no excuses for it. Like I said, if there's a stretch anything like this next year, he won't be here and he shouldn't be. But we don't quite know enough yet. And that's important to understand because it's the second season. We have to see what plays out after this. Now,
and I think that, to your point, Jerod, I think that's an interesting point, is that if he goes through this next year, he won't have the excuses that are built in this year. And you can call them excuses or you can call them facts. I mean, both exist. Look, the injuries have been devastating to this team. They really have. And now that everybody's back healthy, you're starting to see them play better. But still, these guys, a lot of them aren't in game shape. They're not back to where they were. And that's a huge thing. I mean, Rob Finney was becoming a really good point guard and a really good perimeter player for this team who could knock down shots and be clutch and all that stuff. He gets a concussion, and he's a different player when he comes back because he's just so out of rhythm. He's starting to get back to that. We finally are seeing him start to be that guy again, a shell of that guy, but still, like that guy that he was in December. But that's your point guard. I mean, that's your starting point guard. He had won that position from Devontae Green, and now he's kind of, almost like having to start over. And I think that was huge for this team. And I think that if you look at some of the other factors, especially with how streaky a guy like Devontae Green is, if he had a good game, the team might win. But if he has a bad game, this team without Rob Finney had no chance of winning. And so I think there's just been so much up and down with this team, and there's been so much turnover and change to the lineups and all that because of necessity, not because of, choices by the coaching staff. So, but if this happens next year and you don't have all those factors thrown in, or even if guys do get injured again, then you're starting to question, well, what are the practice habits? Like, what are they doing to cause these injuries and all that? This is right now looks like just a confluence of all the bad things that could possibly happen. I'm not absolving the coaching staff and all of their in-game decisions and all of that, but you can survive that with your full roster and the team playing well. And you look at what the coaching staff did earlier in the year. Really, the Duke game is the only game where they didn't look like they knew what they were doing and, that they were on top of everything and everything. Now it's changed, but what are the factors that make it change? I think you have to dig deeper than just wins and losses before you start, throwing the coaching staff out the window. Now, again, if this happens next year, it's a different story. We're beyond making excuses for these guys. They need to figure out ways to win.
James has a question specifically for you, Brian. He says, who is having the more disappointing season, IU or the Lakers?
I would say, that's interesting because both have dealt with injuries. I mean, the Lakers were 4th in the West on Christmas Day and beat the Warriors by 20 at Golden State, lost Rondo and LeBron James, and it kind of threw everything off. But Indiana's dealt with injuries too. I would say Indiana because I think there were a lot of expectations coming in this year. I think the Lakers' only expectation this year was to make the playoffs because of all the young guys and then go get another superstar in the offseason, and then they'd start to challenge for a title. I don't think that anybody reasonable expected them to challenge for a championship this year. It was just the goal was make the playoffs and make that leap. But yeah, both teams have dealt with a lot of injuries. Lonzo Ball is still going to be out for like 6 weeks. I mean, that's, he's your starting point guard, just like when you miss Finney or whatever. So yeah, I'd say it's pretty even, but I would say Indiana because I think there were higher expectations and a higher ceiling on things for Indiana than there were for the Lakers. I think anybody reasonable didn't expect the Lakers to do much other than make the playoffs. Now they may not even do that.
Here's a question from Matt. After listening to the interview with Colin Hartman on the Grueling Truth podcast, Hartman also did an interview on the Hoosier Hysterics podcast that was really good. Matt says, I was stunned at some of the things that went on behind the curtains when Crean was there, things that affected the team we never knew about, like never knowing what their practice schedule would be on a daily basis. I remember the first time I was told that. I thought it was one of the most insane things that I had ever heard. Absolutely.
I heard about it when they were there, but I didn't really believe it fully. I was just kind of like, oh, that can't be every day.
I know. That can't really be true, right? They don't know when they're going to practice, and they get texted. And sometimes, as Colin said, sometimes they would get a text at like 6 o'clock in the evening or 5 o'clock in the evening that said, I hope you enjoyed your day off. But they couldn't do anything because they're going to have to practice. Just so ridiculous. But Matt says, what are some other things that the players went through or maybe are going through now that might be affecting their performance? I've thought with their wild swings in play this season, something internally was likely going on. So, things that the players went through, I mean, beyond, some, things that we've heard from people and some of the stuff that you hear on interviews from a guy like Colin, we don't know a lot about what they may be going through. I think one thing that you can anticipate whenever there's a coaching change, like there was with Indiana, Ryan, is, you have guys that were recruited to play one system. And in this case, this is not going from Thad Matta to Chris Holtmann, as we talked about. This is two coaches with almost polar opposite personalities, polar opposite systems. Maybe not polar opposite, but distinctly different. And it does feel like there have been personality clashes among players, guys who were recruited by one coach and recruited by another coach, and personality clashes between coaches and players, specifically, players who were here before and the coach. And you add that to the mix of all the injuries and all the other things that have happened, and that certainly hasn't helped. So, and you will see that sometimes when a new coach takes over, which a lot of times is why there is attrition when a new coach takes over, because it's not the right fit, because the coach didn't recruit those players. Now, Archie did make the decision to keep guys like Al Durham and Justin Smith and Clifton Moore, so he's not absolved from that. But I think it is natural for things like that to happen. And I think we've seen some of that this season. What will be interesting is, what does the roster look like next year? Who ends up leaving in the offseason, if anybody? Because I think if those kinds of issues were strong enough that they were really impacting this team this year, then you would expect maybe those guys to find a different place to play basketball next year. And I'm not saying we know, of any guy who is going to do that, but when a season is this bad, it's still early in a coach's tenure. Seeing some attrition, seeing some transfers would not be a shocking result after a season like this.
Not at all. I mean, and you say that, these philosophies were, I wouldn't say polar opposite, but they were very opposite philosophies. Offensively, there's some differences. I think it's more of a set system with Archie than sort of a Crean system was almost like jazz. You just kind of improvised as you went along, and I think this is more of a set, system as a guy playing a piano. I think that also defensively, it's completely different, and I think that some guys fit it, some guys don't. Some guys want to play up on, on ball defense man to man for 50 feet as opposed to, playing within the system where you're responsible for other guys and you're responsible for help. And you have very specific areas you're supposed to be in and all of that with the pack line. But I don't know. We'll see. I think we have heard whispers of clashes behind the scenes between players that are there for Archie and players that were there for the previous, regime and all that. And I think that that's going to happen. And Archie is bringing in a different type of player than Crean did. And Crean also loved to get projects and work on them specifically. And I think that while a lot of those guys wound up having a lot of success with, guys like the Durrell Oladipo and Will Sheehy and, Will Sheehy, we all know my thoughts on him, and OG Anunoby, those guys. But I also think that spending so much time working on individual guys does take away from the rest of the team. And I think you did see some of the higher level guys under Crean suffer because of that, because they weren't necessarily, they were high school kids who weren't necessarily self-starters. You have to kind of plug them all into that development system as opposed to focusing so much on guys with high athletic upside. I think you need to focus on everybody. And I think that additionally, what you're seeing is guys that Archie has brought in are more willing to do things that he would do, which is dive on the floor, go after loose balls, be the guy who, pumps you up and has a little bit of emotion behind him and things like that. And some of the previous guys weren't those guys. And I think you're starting to see as they leave the program, I do think you're going to see a different type of player in this program. And I think that if you look at the freshmen who are playing, and you see a guy like Race Thompson come back, and it's stark to see him play and be like, oh, okay, that's what we were missing, and there's a reason why Archie was so high on a guy like Zach McRoberts, and regardless of his shooting ability, and Zach being out this year has been a huge blow to this team from a perspective of guys doing all the right things they should be doing, because you look at what he provides and you look at what Indiana's missing, and those two things line up pretty well in a lot of spots.
Yeah, and look, it should be noted that even with a coach who takes over and wins, there can be personality clashes. You probably just don't hear about them as much because you're winning. When you're losing, everyone is searching for every reason. Why on earth have we lost 12 out of 13 games? It's funny, Bart Torvik kind of ran the numbers for what the odds were of this. He has Indiana ranked 67th in his ranking system. What were the odds of Indiana losing 12 out of 13? It was like a 6% chance. And the odds of Indiana losing 12 out of 13 with the one win coming at Michigan State was one in 1,000 simulations. just insane. Absolutely insane. All right, Ryan, any final thoughts here? We got one other question about how the season would have been different with Jerome and Race, but I feel like we end up covering that every show we do. So no reason to talk
Please
about
come
that
back.
more.
Please come back, Jerome. We need you. We miss you.
We do.
I mean, this is a guy who has first round, lottery pick upside. I mean, he legitimately does have lottery pick upside. He's got to develop right. Obviously, there's a reason he was ranked 45th, where other guys were ranked in 5 stars in top 10. I think competition had a little bit to do with that as well, because Ohio is not a hotbed of high school basketball. But he's a guy who has lottery pick upside, and they have missed him tremendously this year. Imagine Indiana had another scoring option that could play 25 minutes a game. I mean, it changes the dynamic of the team, and you could say, well, it's just one player, but if it's one player with that much talent, it really does change the dynamic of things. And he's also a guy who can shoot. So, both
things that would help.
Yeah, and Race Thompson. I mean, you've seen him for 18 minutes in 2 games, and you already see what this guy can bring and what they were relying on having. He was supposed to be like the 7th man this year, and he's just has been out, and it's been a shame that he's been out. But hopefully he's past that, and we don't have any other issues, and he's just an Indiana guy for the next couple of years.
Yep. Alrighty, coming up on the Assembly Call, Mike DeCourcy will be here for our Big Ten Roundup. We'll talk about Indiana's loss to Iowa, and then we will go around the Big Ten Conference, talk about that big Michigan State win, and start looking ahead to some of the Big Ten tournament seeds and where Indiana expects to fall there. Stick with us on the Assembly Call. And welcome back to Banner Monday. Each week here in our second segment, we zoom out to get an objective opinion on our Hoosiers and to look at how things are going across the Big Ten Conference. And as you know, there's no one better to do that than Mike DeCourcy, who covers Big Ten hoops for BTN in addition to his columns for the Sporting News. Mike, welcome back to Banner Monday.
Hey, Jerod, how are you?
I'm doing well. I mean, Indiana still isn't winning, but at least we're playing a little bit better these last couple games. So there's that. So here's how I want to start this week. Jordan Bohannon obviously did it again. To Indiana. And since this is an Indiana podcast, and I'm sure you want to appease the masses, what is the meanest thing that you are willing to say about Jordan Bohannon on this podcast?
The meanest thing?
Yes, the meanest thing. Rip him.
Is this like a made-up insult, like your grandmother wears army boots from...
Sure. Anything. We'll take anything.
You could say, your brothers were all better, or something like that, because there's been a million of them, and they all were terrific. You could try saying that. But he's been just phenomenal under pressure. And if you give him any room at all in that situation, he's going to make you pay. It's one of the reasons why I a few years ago had a debate with Ken Pomeroy, who I absolutely adore his work. I think he's great. And he gave numerical voice to a lot of theories that I had about the game back a decade or more ago. And so I love his work, but I understand he has to calculate this and that, but I don't believe that late game success is a 50-50 proposition. I believe, he has that luck factor in there. And, we both got tweets about that today. Mm-hmm. I guess he has to quantify that some way. But I don't think it's luck. I mean, guys who do what Bohannon does and teams that do what, say, Cincinnati does, there's an art to it. Cincinnati's up 8 points with 6 minutes left. They blow all but a point of that lead. But down the stretch, they make the plays more often than not. Way more often than not. They made clutch free throws. Keith Williams went to the line, made huge free throws in a situation where if he misses one, if he misses both, I believe you had a front end. If he misses that, Connecticut has a chance to tie or win. If he misses the second one, Connecticut can come down and tie with a three, and then they have to decide whether to foul or not. No, boom, boom. He makes them both. They get late clock, bad situation, lucky to get the ball to their point guard, Kane Broom, and he has like a half a second to get a shot off, fires in a three. These teams just don't panic, and so that's the big difference between Iowa right now and the teams that they're playing.
In Ken's defense, I think he might have even said that luck is not a good term for what that measures, because it's not really about luck. There's a ton of things that can go into why you underperform, your expected win-loss record based on efficiency. But, to your point, I mean, I think we saw Indiana win a lot of close games early in the season, and you could point to specific execution that they got right. Like Rob Finney switching the screen against Penn State, and ended up getting that steal. And we've seen here toward the end of the season close games where it's like, what are you doing, at the end of the game? My question for you at the end of the Iowa game, I think Indiana's offensive execution, it's pretty clear. We've seen it before. I mean, you want the ball in Romeo's hands, but the step-back threes at the end of regulation, probably not the best option. So some of the offensive execution just hasn't been good. But defensively, with what happened at the end of the game there with Bohannon, because Indiana's three-point defense was terrific against Purdue. It was terrific almost the whole game against Iowa. And then Bohannon just starts hitting these shots that look out of this world because he's off balance. It looks like he's covered. I mean, when you see that, do you just say you kind of got to tip your cap to a remarkable shot maker? Or do you say, you know what? Devontae Green, you got to be a step closer to him. You got to do whatever it takes to not even let him get the ball because you know what he can do there. Like, where do you fall on that in terms of Indiana's defense at the end of that game?
Well, first of all, there are times when you can do everything right and that player can still make a shot. I think you have to understand that. I don't think this was one of those times. I watched those plays very closely. There were 4 of them. On one, he got over-aggressive, overran the play, and he overran to the opposite side, away from Bohannon's shooting hand. So he's on the other side. If he overruns to the shooting hand, it's no trip at all to get back. He just happened the direction he was flowing. He overruns to the left hand, and then that gives the right hand. And Bohannon, remember, doesn't need a lot of room. So he gives him the right hand, and Bohannon's able to get it back. And you can look at it, and Devontae is challenging the shot, but he's challenging it after Bohannon has what he wants. He needs the room to get his right hand free, and he has it. There was the play on which Juwan tipped the basketball, okay? It's what happens there. Does Devontae dive on the floor because the basketball's loose? No. Does he recover immediately to get his guy? No. Watch him. He's standing there waiting for something to happen, not making something happen. And when it ultimately winds up in J-Bo's hands, it's too late. He can't get back into the play in time to matter on the shot. And probably the most concerning of them, and this partly because it was the last, and honestly, by then he should have been out of the matchup. On the last, when Jordan winds up on the baseline, inbounding the ball, I mean, look, I'm not a coach. I've never been a coach other than my Y League team when I was in high school, okay? But I've watched and studied this game for years, and I understand it. And when I saw Jordan inbound the basketball from the left side, from the corner on the left sideline, the left baseline, right baseline as you're facing the basket, left as he's standing and throwing in bounds, you know exactly what they're going to do. They are going to inbound it to the nearest guy, probably a big guy, and then they're going to dribble handoff to him. Maybe no dribble, just a clean handoff, depending on what's necessary. You know that's what they're going to do. It wasn't hard at all. And honestly, I thought Juwan should have switched it. I switched it to the point so that Jordan had 2 guys on him. Even if that meant the roll man was clean, okay, let him try to make the pass over Juwan's reach, excuse me. And so I don't think that they handled that play. That was not totally on Devontae. That was on both of them. But again, Devontae's execution there wasn't good enough either because he was too far away when Jordan came in bounds. He didn't diagnose, okay, I know exactly where this is going. I know that when he inbounds this basketball, he's going to cut right to the 3-point line. So I got to be, he should have been angled to take away the possible lob to the rim. He's got to be angled there. And then as soon as Jordan releases the ball, he's got to shoot that direction because that's where he's going.
Yeah. Would have been nice to see how that would have ended if Rob Finney had been in the game, a little bit headier of a defensive player who hurt his ankle. And as people are mentioning in the chat, Rob missing the free throw, Al going 0 for 2 at the line at the end of the game, that puts a 3-pointer back in play to where it can hurt you. So it all just kind of goes together. So let me ask you this now, and this is not going to be a subject that any Indiana fan is going to want to hear, but as we now look down the stretch and what Indiana is playing for here over these last 4 games, trying to get a bye in the Big Ten tournament, playing on Thursday, not Wednesday, is, something important. Indiana is currently, I think, 13th or 12th, maybe.
Well, 12th, I think. I'm not sure. I didn't, in writing it down, I think they and Penn State are both.
Yes, they're tied with Penn State. That's right. And Indiana has the tiebreaker.
Exactly.
So they've got Rutgers, Illinois, and who else is ahead of them? Minnesota. Okay, and they would need to jump over
Nebraska. It's Nebraska.
That's right.
By 1 game or by half game, but 1 win.
Yep.
Rutgers is a game and a half ahead of them. Illinois a game ahead of them. I think maybe 2.
Yep.
Illinois is at 6-10. Minnesota's at 7-10. So you have to catch them, which means you, at the very minimum, out of the 4 remaining games, have to win 2 just to be in. Do we have the tie break mode?
Yeah.
And then, of course, they would all have to lose all their games. So it's a real challenge from where they are to get to that spot. But Rutgers at this point is 6-11, and then Illinois is 6-10, and that's 9-10. So you're not that far space-wise. You don't have to climb over a lot of teams. You have to climb over in Nebraska. Here's Nebraska's deal down the stretch: at Michigan State, Iowa at home.
That's tough.
So if they do great in that, they're getting in the tournament even. So, but it's hard to do. So there's that. So I don't think you have to worry a ton about the Huskers at this point. So then your target is Rutgers, which would be the next in line, and their schedule is at Iowa, Penn State at home. So there's a likely loss on the schedule, and then kind of a tussle with Penn State. And then good news, you get to decide things head to head on your court to an extent. If you're still in the picture at that point, having done some work yourselves, you get to go head to head against that team. So, and then of course, for the Hoosiers, you got Wisconsin at home, Michigan State at home, Illinois on the road. There are winnable games there. I think Michigan State's going to be pretty fired up, but the Hoosiers already did beat them once. Wisconsin has been a tough team for IU to beat over the years, but they're in your gym. And even the league's elite, Iowa, Michigan State, we mentioned, haven't been out of reach. They just Purdue, of course, haven't been out of reach. Haven't reached them. So it's doable based on the schedule and based on 95% of IU performances. You just got to close that last 5%.
Trying to figure out what my reaction would have been if before the season you had told me that late February we'd be talking about what Indiana has to do to get the 10 seed in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I obviously we didn't think it was going to go this way, and there were many flex points when it didn't have to, but there's so much has gone wrong. Very little has gone right when you think about it. What would you say, Rob Finney? That's gone right. People didn't expect him to be this good as a freshman, but even at that, you have the asterisk that his concussion was just brutally costly to the team.
Yeah.
I think Juwan has had about the year that he could have expected. It's just in a losing cause. Deron, again, fine year, but
he's at least healthy. That's nice to see.
Now he's healthy, but
now
full season of health, totally different team and year, probably. I don't think there's much that has gone, like if you had a 50-50 deal, could go either way. I think it's all gone. Nearly all of it has gone the wrong way. Even the things that have gone right had a lot of wrong attached to them.
Yeah, that's very well said. All right, well, let's look around the Big Ten. Start with the power rankings. We had a big game over the weekend that I have to think is going to have some impact on those power rankings. How do you rank the top four right now?
We've had Michigan as our number one team for a very long time, and we do have a change at the top. So it has taken a while and a lot of work, but Michigan State's overcome as a result of yesterday's win in Ann Arbor. It was a magnificent performance by the Spartans, and I think it was a revelation in many ways. It was, I wonder if the people inside the program are like, we kind of knew this is what would happen if that happened. That if we lost Nick, we might get better, and they have. Now, I think when Nick Ward is healthy again, and presuming it comes before they are eliminated from the NCAA tournament, and I think that'll happen because we still have 2 weeks of the regular season, then the week of conference tournament. We've already been through a week since he got hurt, so that'd be a full month before they even play their first NCAA tournament game. So I think that in some ways it's made them better, and Nick can come back and become a complementary offensive piece. We can't score. Okay, put Nick in, throw him the ball. Put Nick in, let him rim run, and let somebody try to deal with that. Nick gets out of running when he plays starters minutes by the second half, but at the beginning of the game, he's often a threat to get 2-3 buckets that way. If he's playing 18, 20 minutes, then all of a sudden he might run in all of them. So he becomes more dangerous then. And Xavier Tillman's offensive ability, his defensive ability, his significant improvement over Nick Ward as a defender of screens, as someone who rebounds. They are much improved defensively. They were fine, very good, maybe even defensive team before Nick got hurt. They've become a great defensive team in the last 2.5 games. The numbers are phenomenal. 36.5% shooting, I think, about 57 points a game, give or take, and like 26% from three. That's what teams have done in the 2.5 games since Nick got hurt.
They're turning opponents into Indiana offensively, basically.
The way I put it
was.
Which I knew would not please all Spartans fans, and pleased some of them less than I maybe thought. I got some interesting responses on Twitter. I said they discovered their inner Michigan. They became an elite defensive team, and they weren't before. They were, like I said, their efficiency ranking was very good, but you could beat them.
Yeah,
you could beat their D before, but the last 2.5 teams, I mean, Ohio State, they just wiped off the floor, and then Michigan, like they didn't destroy Michigan's offense, but they made them very quiet.
All right, so we've got those two, and then who rounds it out then after that?
Purdue is coming very close to overtaking Michigan. That'll be decided within the next 2.5 weeks or 2 weeks. Excuse me. They're coming close. It's just body of work is still favoring the Wolverines. But the Wolverines got to get their offense going. Purdue is maxing out. I saw on Saturday the defining moment of the Purdue season. You might have thought that it happened when Harms reached over Jawan to tip in the bucket that beat IU, but the defining moment of their season, it's like the microcosm of Purdue's 2018-19 team. Late clock, game still in the balance, really need a bucket. Carson gets frozen outside the perimeter, and he's really struggling right now, and he has to let go of a shot. He shoots an air ball that is legit 3 to 4 feet short. And what happens? Grady Eifert flies in like Mighty Mouse or whatever. Here I come to save the day. Ball falls right in his hands, and he finger rolls it into the goal before coming down.
I didn't even see the game, and that was about what I was going to guess.
Yeah, I mean, he made like 2 or 3 plays that were similar, but that was like the microcosm Purdue moment. That's been the difference between them and every other team in the league, really, because there are teams in the league that are more talented than they are, and there are teams, that are ahead of them or in their company, and then there are teams that are more talented that are, wishing they could be right there with them, like maybe a Wisconsin or an Iowa. But they are the ones that make those plays. They're winning games, even with Carson struggling terribly to make shots in a slump he probably never imagined. A slump that that is really affecting the way they run their offense, and yet they still are able to win basketball games.
And then after them, who do you have in that coveted fourth spot?
I think Maryland is playing very well right now, and still the most talented team in the league in terms of NBA type players.
Yeah.
And a team that if they, I'm not going to say keep it together, because I think there's still some togetherness there that isn't quite all the way. I saw great progress in that regard with Daryl Morcell on Saturday. I think he found a role in that game, a way to affect every possession. He was fantastic against Ohio State. And so I think that was a big moment for him, and maybe a big moment for them in developing a winning chemistry. They haven't overachieved in an NCAA tournament yet since Mark got there. They've made it. They did okay in 2016, made the Sweet 16, but then didn't really put up a great fight. Made it, I think, 2017, and got beat around pretty good by Xavier in a game where they were the higher seed. So, you're sort of skeptical. Will this team, can this team hold its seed at least? I'd like to see whether or not they can do that. But I thought Morcell's performance in that game was suggestive of a guy who is now understanding how he can stitch together the great talent that they have and not be superseded by the really promising young wings they have, like Sorrell Smith or Eric Ayala and Wiggins, et cetera.
Yeah. Who else out of those teams? Who else caught your eye, players or teams this week?
Well, Cassius Winston, to me, it's the Big Ten Player of the Year award. Now is his to lose. Now I think I have a vote in that. Now I've been invited into the circle after 10 years at the Big Ten Network. The AP has finally offered me a ballot, so well deserved. Yes, so I think I'll get a chance to have my say there. I think he's got the award. It's in his hands. He's maybe at the 15-yard line. There's maybe a defender a few strides behind him. He's just got to cover the rest of the way, but it's still there to be. He's still there to be caught. And then I was really impressed by Lamar Stevens, his performance at Illinois. I think it's an interesting question to discuss. Can you be an all-conference first-team player in a great league like this from the 14th, 15th place team? The 13th, 14th place team. Can you? I don't know. I think
if you're one of the 5 best players, I don't see why not.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big team success guy, and I think that matters. But when you're playing like this, you maybe overcome that obstacle. He's been phenomenal, and I don't put much of the losing on him, if any, and the winning that's happening now is a lot on him.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it's an interesting question because if it's just stat accumulation, only because they don't maybe have any other players, you probably have to do more to get up there if you're not having the team success. But I don't think a guy should be disqualified just because his teammates aren't that good. If he's having a great individual season, I mean, there are team standings for a reason. That's where that gets taken into account. And I think a player, you have to judge their performances individually, but I think he should have a shot.
I had a coach tell me one time that it's a sentence that I've always remembered. Somebody has to score the points because you don't shut anybody out in basketball. We've seen that. We've seen guys on bad teams that just get numbers, and we know what that looks like. And that's part of the reason why those guys usually don't get into this conversation. But that's not what I'm seeing when I watch Lamar. It wasn't what I was seeing when I watched him earlier in the year and they were 0-10 to start. And it's certainly not what I'm seeing now that they're 4-2 at this point in their last 6.
Yeah.
He is affecting games. And I think he was affecting games earlier in keeping them competitive in a lot of circumstances. So I do think there's a difference between, a guy who averages 20 on a 2-18 team this year, 2-16 in the old days of last year. So I don't think that what you see with Lamar is simple numbers accumulation because, somebody's got to take the shots and somebody's going to score points when they do it.
Yep. Yeah, and I'm not specifically advocating for him. I would have to look at it, but I wouldn't disqualify him just because Penn State is not that good this year. Okay, so last topic for you. Indiana faces Wisconsin, as we've discussed. What can you tell us about the Badgers and what you think are the keys to beating them?
Well, the first key with playing Wisconsin is you have to decide how you're going to defend Ethan Happ. Do you double? If you do, who do you leave? How do you double? Do you dig and possibly leave open a shooter like Demetric Trice? That's a dangerous proposition. It can really punish you. Brad Davison has made a lot of shots as well. It's a danger there, and it's also a danger if you go. When they play a lean forward, you have to really think about the personnel there.
Yeah.
If you're doubling big to big, say, okay, we're going to go big to big hard and make him give up the ball. First of all, he's really good at passing out of that. I mean, if it's Khalil Iverson, that's the other big. He's really good at dumping down. So if you're going big to big, you have to make sure he sees no passing lane, and that's not easy to do. If you're using his defender, the 4-man's defender, and he thinks he's in a double situation regardless, and then guard sneaks a lean forward onto the floor, then you're going off of a lean forward who's another of their most dangerous 3-point shooters. So that becomes problematic for you. And so that's the first component to deciding or to being competitive against Wisconsin. I think you have to push the pace when you get opportunities. And I mean, they get rip and run, go and see if you can beat them before they set, because they are very good in the half court D. They do a great job with Nate Reavers when he's the 4-man. They do a great job of keeping Happ out of foul trouble by using Reavers to guard the opposing big. And using Happ then to defend somebody else that puts less stress on him. It's not that he's not a great defender. He's really good, but why accumulate fouls if you don't have to? So that's another factor. if you could run it a little bit. And then probably from there, you have to be good in late game execution, because you're probably, if you're competitive in the game and you're not getting well behind, you're probably not getting much distance from them, or you're basket for basket with them. And so in either case, you've got to make sure that your decisions in those moments are sound and precise, and that you don't get caught watching. You understand, you have the right personnel on the floor. That's a factor. And that those players then execute their responsibilities as well as possible. Because look, if IU wins that game, it's not going to be by 15 points. It's not going to be by 10 points. It's probably going to be by 2 or 4.
Yeah.
And so you got to make sure you make good decisions down that stretch.
Yeah, this is one of the best defenses they've ever had. I mean, they're in the top 10. They're ranked 6th in adjusted defensive efficiency. So, and they're a really good 3-point shooting team with a great center down low. So they present a lot of problems.
Yeah, a lot of that's a product of being able to play double bigs. And so that's a lot of size to contend with. Davison's an excellent defender, even though he had gained a reputation for flopping that was not unwarranted. Officials had made it fairly clear. I don't know if they have verbally. He's been warned. I don't know whether they do that, but I think that their calls has made it clear to him that, look, if you're going to draw a charge, you better draw a legit charge, because we're not falling for anything. If it's iffy, he's not getting that call right now. He hasn't for 3 weeks maybe. And so I think he understands that now. He's got to be sound. He's got to be in position, and he's not getting he's not going to fool anybody. And so his defense has been really good. It's better when he's on his feet than it is when he's on his behind. I'll tell you that.
Are you? Is there any chance that you're going to be at the IU Michigan State game on Saturday?
I am not. I will be in studio at BTN. We've got a great slate of games, both at BTN and within the league on other networks, and we'll be able to discuss it all on our various shows and on the big show at the end of the day.
Well, that'll be an interesting one. Hopefully, we're going to be up there for that game, which is why I asked. But it'll be we get to face Michigan State once again with a full week of preparation. It worked out okay the last time, but we'll see how much different it is this time.
It should be very.
Got to take care of business against Wisconsin first. Well, thank you, Mike. As always, really appreciate you coming on here. And once again, I will say, hopefully next week we have an Indiana victory to talk about when you come back.
Good luck.
All righty. That'll do it for our Big Ten Roundup. Coming up on the rest of Banner Monday, I will talk a little bit more about the IU-Wisconsin game, some keys to victory as we look ahead to Tuesday night. And hopefully the Hoosiers can get back in the win column. We'll talk about it next. Welcome back to Banner Monday. Each week in our final segment, we dedicate it to previewing Indiana's upcoming opponent for that week. This week, it is the Wisconsin Badgers. We just talked about the Badgers with Mike DeCourcy there for a little bit. I'll go over a couple more keys. I did want to address a couple of things from the chat that I saw. You guys are all right. The Iowa loss, ultimately it came down to shooting. Indiana couldn't make free throws. They couldn't make threes. That would have changed the outcome and not even allowed all of Bohannon's threes to matter. But I figured we covered that enough in the postgame show, so that's why I wanted to focus on the defense there with Mike and just kind of get his thoughts on that. But I saw someone, I believe it was Joel, because I was talking about Romeo. He said, why do we want the ball in Romeo's hands? He isn't the best three-point shooter. Fake the drive, kick it to Morgan or Al. Look, I think there are a number of options that Indiana could go to in late game situations. I'd be fine with the ball being in Rob Finney's hands. I think he makes good decisions, can break things down and create. I certainly think Juwan is a fine option. I would say we tried to put the ball in his hands at the end of the Purdue game and he ended up dribbling it off his foot. So, you've got to run an action, I think, that isolates him down in the post to let him go to work, and I would certainly be fine with that. But I'm okay with getting the ball to Romeo because he's such a dynamic offensive player, and because I didn't think Iowa had anybody who could stay in front of him, which is why I thought he probably even had some more opportunities to drive and really be aggressive getting to the basket. Now, if you tell me that it's going to end in a step-back three, no, I wouldn't want to do that. So I'm disappointed that that's the choice that he made, especially when he got Garza switched on to him. But I think he draws so much attention, and is such a good finisher, even on, not even a step back three, but even if he drives in hard and gets a step back 15-footer, he's shown that he can make that. I would much rather have that than a three-pointer, especially when the game is tied. But he can drive and create for others. We saw him create a wide-open three-pointer for Juwan Morgan in the Iowa game. Now, Joel, you're right. Romeo isn't always a great passer. He sometimes drives with tunnel vision. But even that, drive, make the referees have a decision to make to call a foul. That's one of the things he does better than anybody is draw contact, get to the free throw line. But when you just settle for the step back, you don't give yourself that opportunity. So I guess what I mean when I say that I like the ball in Romeo's hands is he can do the most things with the ball in his hands. I think we all agree with that because of all the different challenges that he presents to the defense. But I think if we're going to do that again, he's got to force the issue and not settle. A three-pointer is probably the least efficient of all the things that he does. It was just the easiest shot for him to get. But in that case, start a little bit sooner, give yourself a little bit more maybe time to probe once you get that switch and figure something out going to the basket. So that's what I would say. Bill says, has he finished anything this year? Yes. He's been one of the best finishers at the basket. And even when he hasn't been finishing, he's been getting fouled and his free throw shooting has gotten a lot better. He's actually had a very productive mid-range shooting game. We just haven't seen a whole lot of it. So that's what I mean. I think he, and, freshmen will do this sometimes, at times can be too willing to take the shot that the defense wants him to take instead of forcing the action. If he were to stay at Indiana for, 2, 3, 4 years, we would see him evolve into a just absolute killer of an offensive player. Right now he's still kind of feeling his way. And, his choices at the end of the Michigan State game and the Iowa game, not good ones. I put some of that on the coaching staff. I think it needed to be clear we don't want to step back three in this situation. And it wasn't clear. So some of that's on him, but I think also some of that's on the coaching staff for not, having a better plan in place to where that's not the shot that you get, especially since we've already seen what happens there. So I just want to talk about that a little bit more. I'm fine if we get into a tough situation against Wisconsin. I'm fine with putting the ball in his hands again, as long as it's clear that there's another plan there besides a step back three. And we're going to attack the basket and maybe run some kind of different action to get him the ball in a different place or on the move or something like that. So let's talk a little bit about Indiana, Wisconsin. I don't have a ton to give you on this game. Number one, because I thought Mike DeCourcy just did a good job with it. And because number two, I'm getting... Okay, and as Josh says, to be fair, Archie decided to play for Iowa to switch. They did. Romeo didn't attack. Exactly. So half of that was good for the coaches. The other half is, Romeo, you need to attack, not step back. So that's what I would say. I'm getting a little tired of repeating myself on these previews, saying that the game is going to come down to the three-point line. And yet, when, in our last 5 or 6 games, we've played Iowa twice, we've played Purdue, and we've played Wisconsin. There is a reason why Iowa, Wisconsin, and Purdue are outperforming their recruiting rankings and even outperforming their overall experience level to be in the top half of the Big Ten, even though their talent suggests they should be in the bottom half of the Big Ten. And that is in part because of the three-point line, because of how good they are offensively at making threes. And at least in Iowa, well, at least in Wisconsin's case, they're good at defending the three. Iowa and Purdue give up a lot. They're just so prolific that they outshoot other teams. Wisconsin is actually really good on both ends in terms of their three-point shooting and their three-point defense. They're not quite as prolific as Iowa and Purdue in terms of shooting it. But, I'm getting tired of talking about how the game is going to come down to the three-point line. But in a lot of ways, this game is going to come down to the three-point line because, again, you start looking at, when Wisconsin has lost games and when Wisconsin has won games, it's a pretty clear pattern. When Wisconsin gets beaten, the opposition either outshoots them from three or basically battles them to a draw. I think the Michigan game, they both hit 4 threes. But what the other teams do is they make more free throws than Wisconsin. They beat them from the free throw line. So those two things, either outshooting them from three and, or at least kind of battling them to a draw and then outdueling them at the free throw line. Typically, getting a lot more attempts, but certainly making more, which you can do because Wisconsin doesn't shoot free throws great thanks to Ethan Happ. That's kind of the formula. And I know you can say, well, yeah, duh, Jerod. Most games when you outshoot a team from three and make more free throws, you're going to win. But, Wisconsin is just a very solid team. They don't turn it over. Again, they shoot well. They play defense well. So they're not really going to beat themselves. You're going to have to go out and beat them in a lot of ways by making shots. And, the other thing that you can't do against their defense, which is just very patient, they play at a slow pace, they force offenses to take a long time. Sometimes when we have to take a long time on an offensive possession, we're not really patient, and we just end up jacking up something at the end of the shot clock. We have to be patient and not just settle for long jumpers. We're going to need to take threes when they're there, but we've really got to attack. And that means Romeo has to be attacking off the dribble. We've got to find ways to get Juwan Morgan the ball down low. We've got to get it down to Deron Davis. A guy like Al Durham needs to pick his spots and drive in. You've got to force Wisconsin to foul you, or you at least have to drive in, draw some defense, and get yourself a decent look from three. And if Indiana is just going to settle for taking the shots that Wisconsin wants us to take, we will lose this game again like we've lost the other ones. If we can turn some kind of corner on offense where we can combine being aggressive and kind of forcing the issue a little bit with still having smart shot selection, then we're going to have a chance. Because I think defensively, we're going to do okay. Mike is absolutely right. You've got to know the scouting report. Trice, Davison, Reavers, Pritzel, those guys are all 40% or better from three-point range. So you can't leave them. And you've got to know that. I would rather take my chances with Hap, one-on-one down low, especially if Deron is in. And, and even let Hap score his 20 to 22 points, whatever, on twos, but you don't want to let Wisconsin just go off on you from three-point range. So you've got to know who you can double off of and who you can't. Iverson, Aleem Ford, Kobe King. I know Mike said, Aleem Ford is a shooter, and he is, but he shoots like 30-something%. Let me find the exact percentage so I'm not giving you bad information. Aleem Ford is 28.6% from three-point range on 63 attempts. So he's okay, but I would let him shoot. He's 23% in Big Ten play. Now, he was a much better shooter last year, but if you're going to have to pick your poison and there's a guy that you need to double off of or that you need to let shoot, he would be the guy. So, and the other thing to expect is it'll probably be a close game. Wisconsin plays a lot of close games. They play that deliberate style. They're not going to run away and hide from anybody. And, 3 of their last 5 games, they've played Minnesota, Illinois, and Northwestern. All right, all of those teams are either basically, ranked right near IU and Ken Palm or ranked below IU. And all of those games have been close. Wisconsin won the Minnesota game by 5. They won the Illinois game by 6. And they won the Northwestern game by 5. And again, in all of those games, the teams just weren't able to make enough threes and make enough free throws to win. When they played Michigan State and Michigan, 2 teams that are obviously much better than Indiana, they were able to do that and force the issue a little bit more. So, that's the thing. I to a certain extent, because of the way that Purdue and Iowa play and the fact that they aren't as good defensively, I felt better about our chances in those games than I do heading into Tuesday. Of course, because this season makes 0 sense, we'll probably win the Wisconsin game after losing those. But I think defensively we'll be okay if we can bring the same intensity that we had against Purdue and Iowa. But it's really just going to be offensively against a defense this patient and this solid and this sound. Can we not get frustrated, and are we going to have enough shot making and enough discipline to give ourselves the opportunity to get fouled and get to the free throw line, to be able to give ourselves a chance. I know it's easy to say the game's at home, but we haven't won a home game in a while. We haven't won almost any games in a while. But that's kind of what I look for when we come into this game, and we'll just have to see what happens on Tuesday. It'll be the last time, most likely, that Indiana plays Ethan Happ, so we can all celebrate for that. Let me see a couple more comments in the chat. Come on, Jerod, don't blame Rob for missing 1 free throw. What about all the others that were missed during the game? Yeah, that got taken wrong. During the game, I praised Romeo and Rob because they were the 2 guys that were actually making free throws, and that was the only free throw that Rob missed. There is no blame for Rob Finney. He got the game ball for a reason. I think Indiana wins the game if he doesn't have to leave in overtime. It's just a statement of fact toward the end of the game. That free throw was missed in a big opportunity. So if you make it, it's a 4-point game. But it doesn't mean that it was necessarily more important than the 2 that Al missed or the 3 that Juwan missed or anything like that. It's just, timing matters, in terms of free throw shooting sometimes. And sometimes you just got to make those at the end to take a 3-point game to a 4-point game. So John says, will Fitz match up good in this game? He could. Look, if Fitzner plays like he did against Iowa, Wisconsin isn't going to necessarily blow you away with their athleticism, although at the positions Fitzner would be guarding, guys like Iverson, guys like Ford, they are going to be more athletic than him, but we're going to need shooting. So if Fitzner can come out and make shots, whether they're the mid-range shots or the threes, then he will always have a role for this Indiana team. It's just, can he get out there and produce 7 to 9 to 10 points and make some threes? If he can, then he'll have a role. And if he can't, then he's not going to be much use, because I don't think, like if you're going to double Hap, Fitzner is not exactly going to give you a real strong double, and he's not really going to be quick enough to then go recover to a three-point shooter, so he could be taken advantage of. But again, he's just got to make up for it on the other end by making threes. And if he can do that and have one of those games where he makes 4 threes, then that would be huge. So we'll see. But they said, what happened to Rob? He tweaked his ankle, that's for sure, because I saw him tweak his ankle and start limping, and he didn't play again. I haven't heard anything else about it. He was the player that they sent out, one of the players they sent out to talk with the media. So, I'm assuming that's why he didn't play down the stretch, because if he was healthy and didn't play down the stretch, that just doesn't make any sense at all. So, but I haven't heard. I don't know if Archie's meeting with the media today or tomorrow. So we'll hope to get an update there. But we will see. Anyway, that's all I got. If you have any questions about the game or anything, always available at Assembly Call. And we will have the post-game show. It's a late start. Game begins at 9 Eastern, 8 Central. We'll have the post-game show afterwards. And then again, for anybody still listening, if you're going to be in town Saturday for the IU-Michigan State game, let us know. We're going to be at the Crazy Horse after the game. We would love to have you come hang out with us, even if you're not going to be there. If you're going to be at the game, let us know. Send a tweet so maybe we can at least try to meet up, shake hands, say hi, because the best... Oh, yeah, Josh. Yeah, he'll have the radio show tonight at the Holiday Inn, so hopefully we'll get an update there. But one of the reasons that we like coming up every year is to be able to meet you, the people who listen to the show, who really motivate us to do what we do, especially during seasons like this. So if you're going to be around, let us know, because we'd love to meet up. Okay, that'll do it. If you want to ever see us do the show live, as you know, and be part of the live chat, join us at assemblycall.com on Monday afternoons for the live broadcast of our Banner Monday recording, at least through the end of the season, when we're still doing Banner Mondays. And you can always subscribe to our podcast by searching for Assembly Call wherever you listen to podcasts, and go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Thank you for listening. We'll talk to you Tuesday night after IU Wisconsin, hopefully a victorious episode. Until then, keep your elbows in and your eyes on the rim, and go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop, when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.